We are here to talk about our provocative question. I'm Lynn Anderson, and our question is, as your identity changes, what can you do to foster continued connections and even grow your engagement in communities of practices that can influence your ability to innovate? And I have this quote from the Wenger book. It's found on page 263. And he says, education in its deepest sense and at whatever age it takes place concerns the opening of identities, exploring new ways of being that lie beyond our current state. Education is not merely formative, it is transformative. And I just think about that, identities will change as we learn and grow. Not just our identities, but the identities within our communities of practice will, as everyone else is changing and as our community grows and learns things together, that community will change. And it is that learning that seems to be at the heart of our connection with others, and it becomes the why of our engagement, the reason behind why we're connected.
Absolutely. This is Jen. I'm Jen Wirch, part of this fishbowl discussion. Lynn, to build on what you were saying in terms of the why, Wenger states on page 74 that being included in what matters is a requirement for being engaged in a community's practice, just as engagement is what defines belonging. And I feel like in order to influence our ability to innovate in our communities of practice, we have to be able to express our beliefs, or in other words, our why, so that we're engaging those around us and inviting them to kind of buy into our why and maintain and foster and help our communities of practice grow as all of our identities shift.
Great.
Yeah.
Jennifer, hi, this is Kevin. And, add in a little bit watching the Simon's video. And on that why question, he writes, everyone on the planet knows what they do 100% of the time, and how, and very few do it. And what's the cause, and what's your belief? And I think it's that up there. It's the belief and that it hits that cortex that he was talking about as well.
Right. And Wenger states that. I'm Michelle Vlahoulis, by the way. Our communities of practice become resources for organizing, for learning, as well as contexts in which to manifest our learning through the identity of participation. And he says that as our identities change, as we grow, as we learn and share, we have the ability to influence and create change both on local and global levels. So our identity and learning serve each other. We grow our identity and our connections also grow. I think he said that on page 271.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And, Michelle, there's another quote by Wenger, and this is on page 264, it goes over into 265, talking about the fact that identity is a lifelong process. He says, right. Identity is a lifelong process whose phases and rhythms change as the world changes. Education thus becomes a mutual developmental process between communities and individuals, one that grows beyond mere socialization. It is an investment of a community in its own future. Right. And so, as you were saying, the more we learn together, the greater our capacity for engagement and innovation.
Right. Right. And he says that as we transform our identities, the learning involved is so profound that it can't be easily undone. I like that quote too. That was on page 248.
And to support that one, page 145 speaks about the issues of identity are an integral aspect of the social theory of learning, and thus inseparable from issues of practice, community, and meaning.
Right.
So it's like when we get in these communities of practice, we probably can't figure out, when we go back historically and look, at what point did everything start changing, and who's the one that instigated that, what innovation caused this change to happen? Because it all is this evolutionary process that we're all working to build. We build one another in that.
Right. And that makes me think of when he used the Martin Luther King example, in terms of these community practices and how we come together for this sort of common cause, but how there's oftentimes, a speaker of that movement. Because Martin Luther King, he was the voice behind the movement. He didn't start the movement. He was chosen because he was a great orator. He was known in his community. So he really becomes the face of the movement, but it's not him alone. He fostered connections, and he helped to build an even larger movement. So his ability to transform and innovate really set him apart. But he believed what those before him believed, right, and those later who followed him. So I thought that was interesting and a good example.
Absolutely, and he really lived his why. I know in the video that you're referencing, I think it was Sinek said Martin Luther King didn't go around telling people what needed to change in America. He went around saying what he believed, and he, without any sort of, there was an email back then or anything like that, got 250,000 people to show up on the right day at the right time to hear him speak. And they showed up for themselves, and it's what they believed in America, and they're following what he believed as well. Right. He's living his why.
And he said, this is another thing that he said, and I don't know if we're keeping track, but I went and looked at the transcripts, and this is about 17 minutes, 11 seconds. I don't know if that's important. But he said, there are leaders and there are those that lead. Leaders hold a position of power or authority, but those who lead inspire us. Whether they're individuals or organizations, we follow those who lead, not because we have to, but because we want to. We follow those who lead not for them, but for ourselves. And it's those who start with why that have the ability to inspire those around them or find others who inspire them.
Right.
My personal is just that several students, it's always worked out of Singapore. I catch myself because he's the stability to, I find interest, think I love about it. I know we can work together. It's exciting, passion, and in my this table I think about, and then it gives me that chance to really say, hey, it is something I truly believe in, and I like what you're saying, and I would like to follow. So I can totally take that quote and
so I don't know if Kevin's breaking up, but he's in a hotel room, and I know that his internet is not really. Sometimes there's patches of where he's coming and going, and so hopefully we can maybe in a minute we might be able to find out a little bit more of what he said, because I wasn't sure I could hear that whole example. So anyway, we'll see if it comes back.
Kevin, do you think you could paraphrase real quick?
Quickly, just saying, like, I've had those leaders that I've worked with that I am totally invested in what they do, and it's just so. It's so intense. You want to work with those people, and you're like, yeah, I want to work for this person either now or in the near future.
Right. This question also made me think when we're talking about as our identity changes, I was thinking about in communities of practice, oftentimes when we disagree about our approaches or how we come to decisions. I liked Wenger's discussion about how even conflicting ideas produce knowledge and negotiability, and sort of what that looks like in a community of practice, how your identity may change because you may come to a different conclusion or listen to someone else and say, hey, that totally makes sense. So I was thinking about it in terms of not agreeing, but sort of it changing your identity and negotiating and these conflicting ideas that we often have.
Great. And I was thinking about this comment that Wenger makes when he's talking about imagination, and this is found on page 273. And he says, when imagination is anchored in a learning community, it can become part of a lived identity. and so become an active rather than passive force. For a learning community, imagination is a way to expand the definition of its enterprise. And so when we think about this innovation that takes place, it expands the community of practice. And
Right.
kind of, as you were saying, even when there might be some negativity or some disagreement on things, it's those relationships that are built within that community that can help sustain that despite those
Right.
challenges that you
Right.
have to learn to overcome.
Exactly, and I like Kevin's quote. Kevin, you put a quote down here that from page 153 that says, "Our identity is something we constantly negotiate during the course of our lives." I really like that. I think that's a really great point.
Yeah. Just to add to that on page 158, and it says, because our identities are not something we turn on and off, our various formations are not merely sequence in time.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Our various forms of participation are not merely sequences in time. I don't know if they heard that. I didn't hear it, but that was the end of that quote. So great. Great. Well, we're getting close to the end of our time. Gosh, it seems like it just flies by.
I know.
I know.
Does anyone have some other ideas that they want to share about, how can we foster continued connections and grow our engagement as we influence the innovation that takes place in our communities of practice?
Feel a little stifled, like I don't know if you're not. So.
Oh. No, and I think I'm good on my end. I think we covered some good ground today, and talking about Winger and also the video that we watched for this week.
Great.
Yes.
Great. How about you, Michelle? Anything?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered it all. We talked about Wenger. We talked about Sinek and his golden circle, the what, the how, the why, and how most people, inspired leaders do the why. Most people don't do the why, and that's what makes them successful and be able to innovate and inspire. So, no, I think I'm good on my end. Thank you.
Great.
Great.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone, and we'll sign off and look forward to our next Fishbowl in a few more weeks. It seems like that just comes around too. And I hope you all have an enjoyable spring break next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.